Hey guys, and welcome back to GP Fans on YouTube. My name is Luther. As always, I am your host and we are back. It is finally race week again. 4 weeks too long. We finally have a race this week and we are at the Dutch Grand Prix. The Max Verstappen Grand Prix, a place that since his return to Formula One, he has dominated. He had been the only winner there since his return to Formula One till last season when Lando Norris dominated. So we'll see if it's more Lando Norris domination this weekend and if he can cut that gap down to his teammate. But before we get on to the Dutch Grand Prix, we have to start somewhere because Cadillac, the new team in Formula One for 2026, the 11th team in the sport, announced their driver lineup. A driver lineup that many of us kind of already knew. I mean, the Twitter reporters were reporting it before anything. A lot of people were going with it as if it was fact before the team actually announced it. And have you not, it was exactly what people thought would be. Sergio, Perez and Valtteri Bottas both making their return to Formula One. A fantastic lineup for a team that's starting off new in the sport. This isn't Audi coming to take over stake Sauber. This is a team starting from scratch. And I will tell you why that is the perfect driver lineup for a team coming into the sport brand new. When you look at Sergio Perez and when you look at Valtteri Bottas, the two of them combined, let me talk you through this. They have 527 combined races, 16 combined wins, 23 combined pole positions, 106 combined podiums, and 3,435 combined points. That is a boatload of experience. And I'd love to see, compared to all the other teams on the grid, how that stacks up in terms of the totality of experience that these two bring compared to other driver lineups on the grid. Because I'm pretty certain that would be at minimum top three. It'd definitely be battling for first, if I'm not mistaken. I know Alonso and Lewis Hamilton might do a lot of heavy lifting in their driver lineups, which is why I'm a bit iffy about whether that is true or not. But I think the experience that both of them bring will help the team settle into the sport. They have experience from two of the most dominant teams over the course, since 2014. You know, Sergio Perez spent plenty of time with the Mercedes engine team while driving for Racing Point. He also spent 4 years with Red Bull during what was one of the most dominant eras in Formula One. Those 4 years of Max Verstappen dominance. Obviously, the fourth year was a bit more shaky, but he was part of one of the most dominant seasons in Formula One history in 2023, where the Red Bull team only lost one race that season. Sergio Perez was part of that. He saw that team grow. Even though he had his struggles towards the end of his time in Red Bull, he saw how one of the most successful teams since, in fact, you know what? I said 2014, go back to 2010 because Red Bull were dominant before Mercedes. And obviously Valtteri Bottas joining Mercedes in 2017 and staying there until his final season with them in 2021, saw Mercedes win numerous Constructors' Championships and saw Lewis Hamilton win multiple World Drivers' Championships. He was part of, once again, one of the most dominant teams in F1 history in recent memory. So those two know what a fully functioning, well-oiled machine looks like. And Cadillac have that in their building. Now, obviously, you can go the other way. You can do what Audi have done. They've got Sauber to get Bortoleto and Hülkenberg. You have the one experienced driver and you have the one young driver that's going to lead you into the future. But I feel like Sauber and Audi have the advantage of being a team already established in Formula One. You know, you have the workers there, you have everything. And obviously they're bringing other people, Mattia Binotto and others, Wheatley, etc. But Cadillac don't have that. So I think these two aren't going to be their long-term solution. That's just not going to happen. They're there for now. And once the team is established, once the team is ready, they then move on. Maybe one of them disappears and they bring in a younger driver to replace one of them, or bring in someone who is more experienced at that point that right now we see as someone in their prime to take over and join them up with a young upcoming driver that might be in F2 or F3 right now. You know, Cadillac, they're going to be supplied their engines by Ferrari when they move into Formula One. So who knows? Ferrari have a very good junior young driver, Rafa Camara, who's just won Formula 3. Maybe in a few years, he's going to be the one that steps into that Cadillac role as their future driver, as someone who Ferrari loaned them out to, develop for them until he's ready to be Charles Leclerc's teammate at Ferrari, if Charles Leclerc is there still and not depressed and running away from Ferrari, or maybe to be ready to be Charles Leclerc's replacement. But the key thing about Valtteri and about Sergio Perez is last time we saw them in Formula One, neither of them looked good. You know, Bottas was struggling. Sergio Perez couldn't keep it out of the wall. And I feel that their last experiences in Formula One were not accurate representations of who they were and who they currently are. I think it was obvious Bottas was driving a very tricky car, the worst car on the grid, and he tried his best. There was times where he came so close to points finishes, but was just unfortunate enough to get them. He really did try to maximize that car. And for me, Sergio Perez, I mean, in him leaving, we've seen just how bad that Red Bull can get. I think it's very obvious now to everyone that Max Verstappen, who was saying it's not Perez, Perez hasn't all of a sudden become a terrible driver. It's the car. He was right. And I think, like you've seen with multiple Red Bull drivers, you become so obsessed with you're so scared that you're no longer in that flow state of driving. You're trying to keep the car out the wall. You're trying to drive the car because it's so tricky. You're seeing Max Verstappen still succeeding, still doing well, and you're trying to wonder why you can't do that. It just snowballs, and then you proceed to be driving worse and worse and worse. And I feel like this fresh restart will be very good for Sergio Perez, because I still remember Sergio Perez when he was young in Formula One. I remember how good he was. I remember Valtteri Bottas a few years ago, how good he could be. And I know certain years for both of them at Red Bull and in Mercedes, Valtteri Bottas had some bad years in Mercedes, and Sergio Perez had I think his 2021 wasn't the best, but I think his 2024 was terrible. That was a really bad year, probably the worst out of the two of them. I think both of them will benefit significantly from this reset. And I truly think that they will help Cadillac, whether or not Cadillac are amazing or not, because I think it's going to be very hard to go into Formula One and like instantly build a top of the midfield team or even a challenging team. So I think what they will be able to do is when there are races where Cadillac might be able to get points, they will be able to maximize the chance of that. But it's not all good news in Formula One and in the driver lineup. News cycle, because according to Auto Motor und Sport, Yuki Tsunoda has reportedly been frozen out of the Red Bull setup, with Isaac Hadjar moving up to Red Bull next season to replace him, and Arvid Lindblad, who's in F2 currently, to join RB next season next to Liam Lawson. Now, to me, there are quite a few layers to this. Yuki Tsunoda flatly just deserves better. And I think last season I spoke with Nicholas about this on here and told him, I think there's only one way I see this going. I truly thought there was only one way I saw Yuki Tsunoda's future going. As soon as Honda's partnership with Red Bull was seen to be leaving, and as soon as Honda announced that they were going to be partnered with Aston Martin, because they announced that they were leaving Red Bull a significant time ago. He was going to be frozen out because Red Bull don't want him. Red Bull never wanted him. He's not a Red Bull junior driver the typical way. He's a Red Bull junior driver because he's a Honda-backed driver. Honda paid Red Bull to take him under their wing. But Yuki still deserves better, because you look at his season in Red Bull, it's been a struggle. It's flatly been a struggle, and it's been a disappointment. Regardless of how tricky that Red Bull is, Yuki needed to be better. And I feel it's the same way Sergio Perez. I used to defend him so much, but he still could have done better. 10 points by Yuki Tsunoda over 12 races for Red Bull. Unacceptable. It's unacceptable. But how did Lawson look at Red Bull in those first two races? Terrible. How did Sergio Perez look last season at Red Bull? Terrible. How did Alex Albon look at Red Bull? Not good enough. How does Alex Albon look now? Nicholas just gave him driver of the season so far. How did Pierre Gasly look at Red Bull? Awful. Went on to win a race for AlphaTauri, not for Red Bull. There are issues with that second driver lineup, with that second car, that Red Bull second car, and it ruins the image of really good drivers. I thought Liam Lawson was a really good driver. But at Red Bull, he looked awful. Sergio Perez has a really successful career spanning decades. He looked like he should be nowhere near a Formula One car last season. And Yuki Tsunoda, every single year in Formula One, has improved and improved and improved and improved. And then he comes into that Red Bull car and he looks once again completely out of his depth. But now Yuki Tsunoda, the one that's leaving Red Bull. And Red Bull will probably say it's due to his performances. But Liam Lawson continues to have a seat at Red Bull. But they have a direct comparison against each other. Last season, the two of them were teammates for half the season. Yuki Tsunoda had a 4-2 race head-to-head comparison to Liam Lawson. He beat him 4 times, Liam Lawson beat him twice. And in qualifying, Liam Lawson did not beat Yuki Tsunoda once in the 6 races that they were teammates. But Yuki Tsunoda is getting frozen out. And Liam Lawson, who qualified last and then second last in the 2 races for Red Bull this season, continues to have a seat. The other layer to this is where is next for Yuki Tsunoda? Because is there even space in Formula One for him at this point? Because I would argue that the talent he has, even though it's not been on show this season, the talent he has would demand that he is in Formula One next season. The only remaining available seats in Formula One for next season are technically Yuki Tsunoda's current seat in Red Bull and technically the 2 RB seats, because those 3 haven't been announced yet, but it's been reported, like I said, that'll be Arvid Lindblad, Isaac Hadjar, Liam Lawson and Max Verstappen driving the 4 Red Bull cars. The 2 Mercedes seats, which I think everybody knows at this point are going to be Kimi Antonelli and George Russell driving for, and Pierre Gasly's teammate at Alpine. The obvious move, which I believe I mentioned to you guys a year ago and have been banging the drum for since Honda announced that they will be partnering with Aston Martin, is for Yuki Tsunoda to become a reserve driver for Aston Martin. But there's the only thing that happens when you tend to go that reserve driver route is you get frozen out of Formula One. You're out of sight, you're out of mind. Yes, we're going to see Valtteri Bottas back in Formula One this season, but Valtteri Bottas was not out of sight, out of mind. Every single weekend you saw a shot of Valtteri Bottas. He was constantly on Mercedes' social media pages used for PR. They were determined to get him back in Formula One. And they did it. The only chance that Yuki Tsunoda has of returning to F1 if he went that reserve driver route with Aston Martin is if Honda are begging and banging the door. Or if, and I think this is his biggest issue, I think Lawrence Stroll will want another massive name when Alonso retires. He had Sebastian Vettel and he has Fernando Alonso. Unfortunately, Yuki Tsunoda is not a multiple-time world champion like those 2 drivers. So I don't think he will fit into that Aston Martin kind of realm. The only way he would, as I was going to say, is if Honda are constantly begging Aston Martin, offering boatloads of money to Aston Martin to give him a seat. Similar to what they've done with Red Bull, begged for him to get a chance in that Red Bull seat in testing sessions before he was actually a Red Bull driver, begging for them to allow him to get a chance. So for Aston Martin, even though I believe it is realistic he becomes a reserve driver, I find it really hard to believe that there is a future for him as their full-time driver. I just do think that somehow they will go a different way when Fernando Alonso retires. Maybe it is, and I know he's not a champion right now, and I don't imagine he will be because I think the championship is going to go to his teammate, but maybe if Lando Norris loses to Oscar Piastri and loses again to Oscar Piastri next season and is looking for somewhere to go, that Aston Martin seat could be sitting comfortably for him, because unfortunately for Yuki Tsunoda, Lando Norris is a massive name, even though he doesn't have the silverware to back it up. he is still a massive name and a much bigger name than Yuki Tsunoda. But what about the Alpine seat? He's a fast driver, Yuki Tsunoda, and he's worked with Gasly at AlphaTauri, now RB. So could he go there? Would he be a better option than what Alpine have right now? Yes. Flatly yes. Yuki Tsunoda is better than Franco Colapinto. Yuki Tsunoda is much better than Franco Colapinto and much better than Jack Doohan. And I can say, without seeing Paul Aron in a Formula One car, I would pick Yuki Tsunoda ahead of Paul Aron. I think for the consistency that they're looking at, and people were talking about Valtteri Bottas potentially going to Alpine, you can get that from Yuki Tsunoda. It allows him to get a fresh start. It allows him to be working with a teammate that he's worked for years with. His first teammate in Formula One was with him for his first 3 seasons in Formula One. I think it's perfect for him. So even as you guys know, I've been so critical of Alpine. For Yuki Tsunoda, and even though I don't trust Alpine at all, if Yuki Tsunoda is trying to stay in Formula One, I believe Alpine really could have a good car next season. They're no longer making their own engines, and that Renault engine has been disastrous. The power deficit, the battery deficit that they have to every single team is ridiculous. But now they're going to Mercedes engines. Alpine build a good chassis. They build a good car. And you see that in less power-dependent tracks. If Yuki Tsunoda makes the jump to Alpine for next season, with that being the final seat left, I really think people could see who Yuki Tsunoda was just last season. Or in 2023. I think Yuki Tsunoda was brilliant in 2023. I think Yuki Tsunoda was brilliant in the first 2 races of the season, but in fact, it was RB that messed him up with the strategy calls and with his front wing just imploding out of nowhere in China. I think he could prove himself again. And so I'm hoping he does get the opportunity. But as I said, we are in Zandvoort this weekend. I think after last season where Lando Norris was just absolutely incredible at Zandvoort. I think that's actually one of his best wins of his career. I feel like this season, with what I've seen from the Red Bull car, from what I've seen from the Ferrari cars, and what I've seen from the Mercedes cars, I do believe that it's going to be more of the same. I think that we're going to see more McLaren dominance. But I do think that this season it's not going to be Lando Norris dominance. I do believe that Oscar Piastri will be right there with him. I think they're going to be battling for the win, them too. Now, this is a track that I think Lando Norris does like. And so he will have the upper hand. I do believe he likely will be on pole. And I think we might see a typical Lando Norris strong qualifying. Like, you know, when there's a couple tenths between him and his teammates, and you're like, damn, fairs. But I think in the race, Oscar Piastri will be right there with him. There's only 10 races left this season, and there's a 9-point gap between the 2 McLaren drivers. So I think what we need to be prepared for this season now is for the tension to rise between the 2 of them. I truly think, though, even though a lot of us don't believe that they have that dog in them to make that tension build, I think we're going to slowly start seeing it come. And I think this weekend, we'll see how they act together. You know, Hungary was such an interesting race with how Lando Norris won it, with Oscar Piastri feeling like he didn't get given the same opportunities as his teammate. I think there's definitely going to be a bit more animosity on track. And mate, Oscar Piastri has been doing some dangerous lunges into Lando Norris. I wouldn't be surprised if we see one of them into turn 1 in Zandvoort. We know we have that long DRS straight going into turn 1. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I love Zandvoort. I know it's very narrow and the overtaking opportunities are pretty trash. I know we had the most overtakes there in F1 history in one race, but that was weather dependent. That wasn't because of the track. The track is a very difficult track to overtake on. But I think for drivers, you can tell drivers enjoy racing around there. I think it's a beautiful track. It's fun. And the fans there are fantastic. You know, Max Verstappen always has a massive amount of support there. So it'll be great to see that over the course of this weekend. And flatly, it's just great to have F1 back. So it's been a pleasure talking to you guys. Hopefully we have a great Dutch Grand Prix. Put your predictions in the comments below. Let us know what you think about what you're going to see at Zandvoort this weekend. Let me know what you think about Yuki Tsunoda potentially being frozen out of the Red Bull setup. Check out Nicholas's news videos. He has a news video on the Yuki Tsunoda news. And let us know what you think about the Cadillac lineup. I've been Luther. It's been a pleasure. And I'll see you again next week. Peace.